Hello and welcome to Bookish and Unbalanced, the podcast that talks all about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Amy Spencer.
I'm Adrienne J. Smith.
And from authors, editors, publishers, readers, and reviewers, we all have a state of mental health and neglect talking about it. Or worse yet, we're ashamed to talk about it. So let's break that stigma. On today's episode, we're interviewing the author Katherine Blakeman. Hello, Katherine.
Hello.
So firstly, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself as an author?
Well, I'm not sure many people will have heard of me yet because I'm fairly new to the sapphic fiction world. I actually started off as a straight historical romance author, so it's a little bit different. But I published my debut novel, The Silent Chapter, back in February last year. But I immediately found myself drawn to the sapphic fiction community, not in the least because I also had a sapphic fiction book on the go, and I'm also gay, which helps. That sapphic fiction book eventually turned out to be The Summer We've Had, which I published back in January, and since then I have embraced sapphic fiction wholeheartedly.
Awesome. So I know a little bit about what you've written, but can you tell us about your experience or your expertise with mental health?
I do have qualifications in psychology and mental health, but I wouldn't call myself an expert. I don't have a degree or anything. But yeah, The Summer We've Had features two mental health conditions at the forefront, two main mental health conditions: depression and dissociative identity disorder, or DID. I don't have any experience of DID itself, so as you can imagine, there was a hell of a lot of research involved. But I do have experience of depression. Ironically, didn't actually get diagnosed until after the book was written and released.
That doesn't actually surprise me based on the conversations that we have had as just podcast hosts in the delay of diagnosis, where we'll be struggling with something for a really long time before we're actually diagnosed with it. And
Definitely.
then we talked, and maybe you want to touch on this too, just about once diagnosis happens, recognizing like the fingers of it in our past.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because my depression started off as seasonal, and then it became all seasonal, which is how I knew that something was wrong. But when I went back and reread The Summer We've Had earlier today, because I forgot most of what I wrote in it, I actually recognized that I did a fairly good job in writing my experience of depression in Cass, who is the main character, who is the one who suffers with depression. And I've had some positive reviews about that. So even before that, I knew I was on to something. I'm just glad that I've managed to portray it accurately. I know that everybody's experience is going to be different, but for me, that is quite true to life, how I wrote Cass.
And I think that's a really important point. Like I felt the same when I was writing Storm, was that I had, or not necessarily when I was writing it, but when I was getting ready to release it, was a real fear that people would think that I was trying to encapsulate everything depression could possibly be in one character.
Mm-hmm.
And actually you can't, it's really, if anyone was to approach trying to write depression like that, I think it's a really foolish way of doing it, because it's so individual and it's so unique to each individual person who does experience it, that you can only really write it from either your experience or, you know, whoever you speak to, or however you've experienced it through someone else. Like it's so, and it doesn't even change from person to person. It changes. Like my depression and my mental health issues change depending on like the time of year, or, you know, the day it is, or whatever it is that triggers it. I think it's really important to recognize that it is so individual.
I know what you mean. At one point in the book, Cass is feeling really optimistic. She's just found her love interest, although she doesn't know it yet. And she's getting her life back together. And she thinks, was it that simple? Was it that simple to heal? was it that simple to get my life back together? Am I just going to be okay now? And then the next day she wakes up and realizes, no, because every day is different.
Yeah, every day is different for sure. And I think to approach it from a very like I don't want to say well researched, because I want everybody to research things really well. But that it might just come off as clinical. And I think because I've read your book, so the way it came off was very real and very connective, right, with people who have experienced depression in that way, but also just in other ways, and just honoring that it's not always linear to work through depression. I think was really nice.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's interesting that you say you didn't recognize the signs until after you'd written them and read them back, and yet you've managed to write them so well, and yet still, like, it's almost like even that process of writing that character still didn't trigger the thought. Like, was there literally no thought beforehand while you were writing it that maybe there was something?
Yeah, while I was writing most of it, my mental health was actually amazing. It was ironically in the COVID lockdown, the first one in early 2020, when I started writing it. And that was a good period for me with my mental health, which I think is why I managed to get a first draft done so quickly. But the fact that I wrote it so accurately is just through mounds and mounds and mounds of research, talking to people, talking to friends with depression and anxiety and other mental health conditions, and just imagining that I'm in their shoes, in somebody else's shoes. I literally put myself in Cass's mind slightly too well, I think, because now I've got her mental health condition. But it's just empathy. Maybe empathy is the wrong word, but being able to feel what your characters are feeling. I think that's how I managed to get it so accurate.
So can I ask the question that you didn't want us to ask? Because you didn't.
Yeah, go on then.
I was like, I think you just answered it.
Yeah.
Which book have you written that has affected your mental health? And it sounds like this one affected it, whether or not you had depression before, but it at least affected it in the sense that you were able to recognize that that's what you were experiencing.
Yeah, it taught me a lot. I mean, I was intrigued by DID and all things mental health before that, which is why I wrote about mental health. But it was definitely educational, and I suppose it affected my mental health in a good way, at least at first, while I was doing the first draft during COVID, because I was being productive, and for me that always, well, the notion of having been productive always helps. I don't know about you guys. Do you guys get that?
Yeah, sometimes when I'm at work, I'm like, let me just do this mailing because I will feel like I have accomplished something today. Even though it's completely not in my job description. I'm like, let me just cut the papers. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm still in awe that you managed to be productive and in a good state of mental health during the lockdown, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Not in a like not that sounded really patronizing. That's not what I meant. What I just meant was, like, I think we hear so many stories about how that period of time affected people's mental health in a negative way. We don't always sometimes hear the positive kind of spin of having that time. And I mean, I didn't have that time. I had working from home and having 2 children to homeschool, and that was in no way kind of like relaxing.
Yeah.
But it was, I think we're so used to hearing still now, I know it's like it both seems like a long time ago and it's very recent history, but it's really nice to hear kind of like something positive coming out of that period of time for someone.
Yeah, I'm very privileged to have had that good mental health, because ironically, before that, I had had a period of bad mental health. And then when the lockdown happened, everything stopped, and it allowed me the room to heal from that, if you like. But you don't really hear of that so much. I presume there are other people like me out there. Hopefully, maybe readers will respond, listeners will respond. Someone out there has got to be feeling like that, surely.
So you have recently, for World Mental Health Day, you put together a huge list of books which had a mental health theme or had aspects of mental health within them. What prompted you to do that?
Simply because mental health is one of my favourite things to read about, as you may have noticed from the summer we've had. It definitely, it just makes my heart sing, if that doesn't sound too cliched. I'm so incredibly grateful, though, for T.B. Markinson and Miranda McLeod from My Heart Sapphic, because without their bookfinder, I would not have had a Scooby where to start. So I was just there, sifting through it, and I just wanted there to be a resource somewhere out there that categorized these books in the sapphic fiction genre with mental health condition by mental health conditions. So that if someone out there thought, I want to read a book featuring ADHD that also has lesbians or sapphic people in it, they'd know where to look, if you see what I mean. I couldn't find that resource out there, so I thought, why not create it? And if it helps promote lots of wonderful other indie authors and sapphic fiction authors, even better.
Do you find in your reading and your writing, because I find this too, I'm really attracted to books that deal with mental health. For me, it's just kind of, it's really relatable to read about other characters that are similar to me in a lot of ways, or similar to people that I know. But I also kind of come at the world with this understanding that everybody has issues and everybody has trauma. Like, that's kind of one of my mottos. Everybody has trauma and everybody is an a-hole in some capacity. And so I don't know if you come to reading or the world kind of with that viewpoint. But that's why I appreciate books with mental health so much. And I'm not even sure if that was a question, but we'll go with it.
It's okay. It still makes sense. It's a podcast. Anything's allowed. But yeah, I like to approach books with an open mind, because I know that I'm always going to learn something, even if it's a new word. It might not even be about mental health, but it can be just something, and I can carry that forward and just use that even in my daily life. I have people around me with mental health conditions, as we all do. And maybe something in that book will help me help them, or help me be a more supportive, better friend or colleague or general human being for them. Because there is so much coverage out there, and it just doesn't get enough recognition, especially with indies, because we're sort of fighting on our own.
Yeah.
We need to help each other.
And I think it was really eye-opening as well when I looked through that list about just how many varied and different mental health conditions were covered in sapphic fiction. I think we hear the term mental health and we automatically think of depression and anxiety and you know, there's a reason for it, because they are most prevalent, but also to see that there's so many different conditions which have been touched on by authors, so many different things which have been highlighted or spoken about, which we may not just be aware of the books or even aware of, you know, those struggles and those conditions and things even being out there, really.
Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, most people who read The Summer We've Had never heard of DID before, or if they had, then it would have been in the context of the film Split, which was released, I think, in 2016, and was so damaging to the world's perception of DID because it villainized it. It turned the main character who had DID into this dangerous. I mean, I haven't watched the film because I knew it would upset me, so I'm only going on what I've heard. But this dangerous, like, child kidnapping, unpredictable villain. And that just completely fed into the stigma around DID and around mental health in general. And I wanted to, obviously, I know I'm not going to reach the same audience as Split because I'm just a 20-year-old girl from England writing a little indie book. But if I can even go the smallest way into rectifying that and reframing DID for the world, then that was half of why I wrote about it. And the other half was I wanted to read about it, so I thought, why not just write about it?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is when people watch a movie or read a book about DID, it's often used as a plot device instead of just this is the character. And you didn't use it as a plot device by any means, but I think I'm trying to think of all the times that I've seen it in like television shows and movies and books, and every time it's been used as some sort of plot device.
Yeah, like, oh my God, this altar has done something really terrible that's going to completely change the narrative. But
Yeah, not
I didn't want to do that. I just wanted it to be, oh, this altar has done something. Now we can move on. And I didn't want, because for some DID systems, the end goal is fusion or integration, having everyone come together in one personality. But I didn't want that for Felicia's system because it's not DID is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that needs to be fixed. They're not broken. It's just something they have. So I didn't want or similar with Cass's depression, I didn't want that to be suddenly fixed because she fell in love. It's not a magic pill, magic bullet. I just wanted I wanted to show that it was possible to live a normal life, a healthy life, have a healthy relationship, and be happy alongside mental health conditions.
Yeah, you didn't want to make Felicia binary, right? All or one.
No.
Which I appreciate for sure. And there's in my world, I've been talking a lot about just the concept that we're never completely broken and we're never completely fixed. And I think that really fits in when we're talking about mental health.
Going back to the list, I wanted to include as many conditions as I could find in sapphic fiction, even if they didn't fit into a category. Like I had one with mutism, which was a silent song by Helen West. I couldn't find any other books with mutism, so I just put that in a little category on its own.
Yeah,
similarly,
I saw that one on there and I was like, oh, I don't know any books like that.
Yeah, I've read that one twice. I literally just finished rereading it yesterday, and I highly recommend it because it's so educational. Here's a little fun fact for you. The first draft of the summer we've had was actually written sometime in 2018. I didn't finish it, but it was completely different. It was set on a remote Croatian island, and Cass was a celebrity singer on the run from her fans. Anyway, Felicia in that, although Felicia wasn't even called Felicia, she was called Maria at that point. Felicia had a daughter who was mute. So Felicia had DID and then her daughter was mute. And eventually I thought, no, I can't afford to split my time between those two conditions. They need to have their own books. Haven't got around to mutism yet, but hopefully one day.
It's like,
it's on my to-do list.
It's like you don't not add complications into a story at all. Like that, or you're writing a 500,000 word novel. To flesh
Oh,
out.
it felt like it.
My
Here's
God.
another fun fact. There is 40,000 deleted words of the summer we've had. I took out a whole second plot point, which I'm going to have to recycle into another book somewhere, because at the moment there's just 40,000 deleted words sitting in a document.
I have definitely done that before, and then put it in the trash can and said goodbye. I'll see you later.
Yeah. At the time that I was taking them out, I didn't realize quite how much I was removing until I went back to the main document, and I was like, oh, okay. I've got no words.
I mean, one of the things that you also touch on in the book is grief.
Yes.
In several different formats, right? In several different ways. Which I really
and grief.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Grief and loss, I think, is also a really huge topic and huge thing that affects our mental health in so many ways.
Ironically, I majored a lot more on the grief, but not with Cass. There was another side character that I took out who was dealing with her own grief, and I was trying to use it to sort of mirror Cass. But I took that out because, again, I just felt like there was too much going on. I wanted it to focus on Cass and Felicia, not this other side character, whose name I can't even remember right now. It was a while
but
ago.
that's when you then write your spin-off book. The second book in the series is
Funny
that.
you should say that.
That's
Funny you should say that. Guess what I'm working on right now? Not that side character, but another side character. You might not remember Jean and Petra from the village choir in the summer we've had. They're getting their own book if I ever actually finish it. It's
you
happening.
said it now. You've given us an
happen.
exclusive. So
there you go. Exclusive news from Katherine.
You've got a couple of months between recording and releasing to get some more words down on it. So maybe by the time this goes out, you can confidently say that it's happening.
Yeah. If you're hearing this in February or March and nothing's happened, just bear with me.
Katherine with a really big stick to get on with it.
Yeah. Just bear with me, sit tight. My writing process is slow. It took me 4 years to finish the silent chapter. So do with that what you will.
We'll send you the recording as a reminder of what you committed yourself to.
Oh God. Okay. Noted.
You said you would have it done. No.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to make a note of this on my little computer calendar, aren't I? My newsletter subscribers are going to be so offended that I didn't share this with them first, because I promised them exclusive news and I haven't really had much news to share with them recently. So they're going to be like,
you've got like
excuse
at
us.
least 2 newsletters. You've got 2 newsletter cycles before this goes out, surely.
I know, but I still don't want to make any solid commitments. Just in case, because I do have an entire other book that I finished between finishing the summer we've had and starting Jean and Petra's book. And that's just sort of hovering on the edge of the trash can right now. It's going to come back at some point, but I'm not touching it yet. Because that was a case of get words down, don't bother to see if they make any sense, just write them, you can come back to them. So then I finished writing them and I was like, oh, I never want to read these words again.
I feel like that every time I finish a book. I'm like, okay, I'm done. Goodbye.
Yeah, just burn it.
But then I'm always impressed, like 6 months later when I'm reading it to edit it. I'm like, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And you find that one little bit when you go, oh my God, who wrote this? This is amazing. Like
yeah, I had a similar sort of thing.
Words long.
Yeah, there was I was rereading the summer we've had earlier because I was thinking, oh God, if I'm recording a podcast tonight, I better know what I'm talking about. And for most of it, I was just cringing silently on my bed with my Kindle. And then there were a couple of bits I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's actually all right. Then there were other bits where I'm like, I don't remember writing this whatsoever. This was a last minute addition.
for sure. So
And that's really like,
go ahead, Amy.
I was gonna say that's a really weird thing because I've not read any of mine back.
Yeah, I've not read
Editing. Because
I've not
because
read
I
the-
just sit there and I hate it.
Yeah. I mean, I was so sick of reading my own words by the time I published The Summer We've Had that I stuck it out there into the world. I was like, here you go, guys. I'm never reading this again, but I'm sure you guys want to, so here you go. But I thought if I'm actually going to be talking about the book tonight, it would help to actually remember what it's about. Because at the moment, my head is stuck in Jean and Petra's book. So I thought, hang on, I better stick my head back into Cass and Heather's world.
At least it's
Refamiliarize.
At least it's the same world, right? So
Yeah, they're in the same village. And you do get some updates on Cass and Heather. Well,
that's good.
at the moment, you do. Whether I'll take them out, I hopefully won't take them out because I like writing about Cass and Heather. It's a bit like meeting up with an old friend who you haven't seen for a while.
Yeah, and it's a really good throwback, and readers really like those like Easter eggs.
Yeah, definitely. I like those Easter eggs.
Yeah. So how does mental health carry over into what you write? And we've been talking about this a lot, but now I guess that you have been through the realization that you have struggled with depression for a while. How does that carry over into what you're writing now and going forward? And I guess in some ways your plans as an author.
I mean, in Jean and Petra's story, there is no depression yet. I may add it, but that's a whole other topic. I lost my train of thought there. Anyway, how does mental health carry over into what I write? It fuels my writing essentially. I wouldn't have. I don't think I'd have a writing career if I didn't write about mental health because it's so close to my heart. And they always say, write what you know and write what you want to write. That just crosses over for me. So that is how I'm writing, essentially. Because both of my books, not just The Summer We've Had, but the silent chapter as well, my historical fiction straight romance, that is big on mental health. It's big on male mental health, which possibly won't appeal so much to the listeners of this podcast. But, guys, if you want to give it a go, you know where it is.
Yeah, I remember when that book came out, and I remember reading the blurb thinking, oh, this is deep. I haven't read that book, but yeah, I do remember reading the blurb going, oh, this is not your typical historical romance.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. I mean, it's not had quite so much traction as The Summer We've Had, purely because I didn't put quite so much effort into promoting it. I have absolutely thrown the kitchen sink at The Summer We've Had. I didn't do that for the silent chapter. I just know at some point I'm going to mix up the titles, so bear with me if I do. I'll probably end up saying something like The Silent We've Had, which I have said quite a few times before. Anyway, yes, what I was saying was it talks about male mental health, which again is a very big ignored topic, especially in the early 20th century when the book is actually set. So again, I don't think that book would be what it is without talking about male mental health and trauma, male trauma, shell shock. That's where it all stems from. That's where the whole thing stems from. The whole book stems from Patrick, the main character, and his experience with shell shock. So just like how The Summer We've Had wouldn't be what it is without Felicia's DID, the same is true of the silent chapter. I'm making a mental note now not to put any words with S's in my future titles because I'm getting mixed up.
Never say never.
Yeah, you may need to, again, remind me of this when you release this podcast.
I'll just
take that one. Hey, Katherine.
I'll just take that one.
Hey, Katherine. How are you doing with that resolution?
Okay, so we end each interview with a rapid fire round of questions.
Oh,
so
no. Okay.
All you have to do is answer with the first thing that comes into your head. Are you ready?
Go on then.
So, what's your favourite source of caffeine?
I don't drink energy drinks and I don't drink coffee, so does chocolate count? Hot chocolate? Cold chocolate?
Got a
Solid
tiny bit
chocolate?
in it.
Yeah,
Chocolate?
any form of
That's-
chocolate.
Chocolate is caffeine. Chocolate is
Yeah.
sometimes better than caffeine, let's be honest.
Exactly. Although, just for me, make sure it doesn't involve nuts because I'm allergic to nuts, and I guess it would be a source of energy if I had to stab myself with an EpiPen. It's a literal adrenaline pen. But that's not the kind of energy I want.
Yeah. So, what's your dream destination vacation?
Oh, at the moment, I have to say Lake Garda in Italy because we were supposed to go there in 2020. We finally got it together to book a Italian holiday, and then COVID happened, and we haven't managed to rebook it. So right now, Lake Garda, but honestly, I would settle for anywhere right now with sun, sea, sand, pasta, and gelato. Because Storm Kieran has been battering the UK the last couple of days, and I just want the sun back.
Very wet here. Where did you see kindness today?
I work in retail, so I see the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes together. What happened today? Today, it's a cliche, but a younger man helped an elderly lady pay for her shopping because she forgot her purse. She was getting in a state about it. And before I could even jump in there, he was in there tapping his card, beep, off you go. You know?
What's your philosophy on good mental health?
Oh, I was actually thinking about this topic earlier in an earlier question, but thought I'd save it in case it came back up, which it did. I was thinking of, I don't know if either of you have read the book Maverick by Max Ellendale.
Mm-mm.
Again, another one I highly recommend. I've reread it about 300 million times. I reread a lot of books, have you noticed? But that book, there is a paragraph or a piece of dialogue between two of the characters that just sums up my attitude towards mental health. And it's what I've quoted this quote to people. So Max, if you're listening, you've had a big impact. And the quote is, "Life is much better on a peninsula rather than an island." By which I mean, let people in, let people onto your island, let people see you and your pain, because they might be able to help you rebuild the land back to the mainland, if you see what I mean.
Where did you find joy this week?
You may cringe, but recording this podcast, because I've never done anything like this
good
before.
answer.
There you go. I've stolen that answer now, so nobody else can ever say it. It's mine. But you've both been so lovely and welcoming, and you guys are just amazing. And thank you so much. That's all I can say.
Well, thank you for coming and agreeing to
Thank
the
you. Yeah,
insanity
thank
that is
you.
this podcast.
I don't mind a bit of insanity.
I would think that none of us here would mind a bit.
Exactly. Isn't that the point?
A lot we might mind, but a bit is okay.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we're authors, so we have to be slightly insane just to do it,
Yeah,
just to put ourselves out there.
risky. All right. That is all for our latest episode of Bookish and Unbalanced. Amy and I would love to thank Katherine for sharing with us today and talking with us. And we also want to thank our listeners for tuning in and getting to know Katherine. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to keep up to date with our latest episodes. And until then, take care out there. And remember, we are all in this together. And now we get to throw.